Before I get into this video, I'd like to give a really quick disclaimer that the theory you're about to hear about Skyrim's protagonist is not confirmed information. It's definitely true that this theory is supported by a lot of evidence, and it is fairly widespread in the Elder Scrolls community, but that doesn't mean it's confirmed as fact, and it should definitely be treated with reasonable skepticism. With this in mind, let's delve into the Last Dragonborn's hidden secret. Let me start by giving you all an overview just so you know where I'm going with this theory. As many of you may know, there's a deity in the Elder Scrolls universe known as Shor, who's arguably one of the most important figures in the Elder Scrolls universe because he is the Nordic representation of Lorkhan, who's the being that created the entire planet on which the Elder Scrolls series takes place. My theory is that the Last Dragonborn is an avatar or a mortal incarnation of Shor. Such an individual is known as a Shazareen. The reason why this theory is so crazy is because it claims that the Last Dragonborn is essentially a mortal incarnation of the being who created the planet Nirn itself. Much more on the significance of Shor and being a Shazareen later on in the video, but for now I want to convince you all that the Dragonborn is actually a Shazareen using three major pieces of evidence. The first piece of evidence that supports the Dragonborn being a Shazareen is a quest called the Ghost of Old Hroldan from Skyrim. In this quest, you meet a ghost who asks you a very bizarre question.
Hjalti, is that you? I've been waiting. You promised me, Hjalti. You promised that when we sacked Folden, you would make me your sworn brother.
And pretty much no matter what you do, the ghost keeps on calling you Hjalti and treating you as if you are this person. The significance of this is that Hjalti Earlybeard is the birth name of none other than Tiber Septim, who famously ascended to godhood and became Talos. Now, Tiber Septim is a very complicated figure, but it is widely believed that Tiber Septim was a Shazareen. There are tons of similarities between Tiber Septim and the Last Dragonborn, which makes sense because they are both Dragonborn, but among all those similarities, this one specifically stands out to me because it isn't somebody saying that you're like Tiber Septim or that you resemble Tiber Septim, it's somebody saying that you are Tiber Septim. This supports the idea of the Last Dragonborn being a Shazareen because if it were the case, then Tiber Septim and the Last Dragonborn would in many ways be the same person as incarnations of the same deity. At the same time, you could still make the argument that this similarity is only because they're both Dragonborn, so let's move on to some more convincing evidence. The second piece of evidence lies in a very interesting line that the Greybeards say to you during the storyline of Skyrim.
You are Ysmir now, the dragon of the north. Hearken to it.
The most important thing in this quotation is the reference to Ysmir. Historically, there are three figures who have carried the title of Ysmir. The first and by far the most notable is Ysmir Wulfarth, an Atmoran-born High King of ancient Skyrim. The second figure is Pelennal Whitestrake, a legendary warrior who's the champion of Queen Alessia in the First Era. The third is Tiber Septim. And what do all these figures have in common? Well, most importantly, they're all Shazareen, but also Tiber Septim is the only one among the three who was Dragonborn, so I don't believe this is a reference to you being the Dragonborn, but rather that you are a Shazareen. Also, I want to emphasize again that this is not the Greybeards saying that you are like others who bore the title of Ysmir, but rather they are literally saying that you are Ysmir. This hints at you being the same person as the other three Shazareen I mentioned earlier, with all of you being an incarnation of the same being in Shor. The last and most convincing piece of evidence can be discovered in the Hall of Valor in Sovngarde at the end of Skyrim's main quest. As many of you probably noticed in the Hall of Valor, Shor is mysteriously absent. You can see his empty throne, but he's not there. Which begs the question, why is Shor not present? Well, here's what I think. You can't find Shor in the Hall of Valor because you are Shor. As a Shazareen and the mortal incarnation of Shor, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to see Shor in front of you and to speak with him because once again, you are basically Shor himself. Shor is the very embodiment of afterlife in Sovngarde, so for him not to be in the Hall of Valor at the very moment you arrive seems like way too strange of a coincidence for me. If you're still not convinced by all this, consider the fact that Ysgramor says that Shor has forbidden all of them from leaving the Hall of Valor, and yet later on you leave with 3 of the Nord heroes who have been forbidden from leaving in order to confront Alduin together. Also, you can actually sit down in Shor's throne. The reason why this is weird is because during the Shivering Isles DLC from Oblivion, you couldn't actually sit in the throne of Sheogorath until after you defeated Jiggalog and actually became Sheogorath. So by that reasoning, it doesn't make any sense for you to be able to sit in Shor's throne unless you're Shor. Now that all of you are hopefully convinced that the Last Dragonborn is an avatar of Shor, let's talk about why this is such a big deal. Once again, Shor is the Nordic representation of Lorkhan, who's the being that's primarily responsible for creating the planet Nirn, which means that as an avatar of the creator, the Dragonborn is arguably one of the strongest beings in the Elder Scrolls universe. But more than that, you can actually go even further with this theory and reach some pretty crazy conclusions, so let's extend all of this even further. A brief warning that the rest of this video is very speculative. Talos is regarded by many as the most powerful being in the Elder Scrolls series, and it's believed that he was able to obtain this power by mantling Lorkhan. Mantling is a very complicated process that I don't really have time to discuss in this video, but in essence it involves one being mirroring another being and impersonating said being until there ceases to be any functional difference between these two beings. So in other words, Tiber Septim became a god by taking the place of Lorkhan. It's likely that the reason why he was able to do this is because he was a Shazarian and already had a deep connection to Lorkhan. If you take a really close look at the Last Dragonborn and Tiber Septim, there are countless similarities between them. They're both Dragonborn, they both grew up in Skyrim, they both went to the Greybeards for help during their journey, and they're probably both Shazarian. This has led many people to believe that the Last Dragonborn is in the process of mantling Talos. Given the significance and sheer power of both Lorkhan and Talos in the Elder Scrolls universe, if the Dragonborn were to pull off mantling Talos, he would arguably be the strongest being in the entire verse. And that is exactly why this theory is such a big deal. Whether or not you want to believe this final bit of speculation regarding mantling, the Dragonborn being a Shazarian inherently gives him ties to some of the most powerful figures in the entire Elder Scrolls universe. Meaning the Last Dragonborn might just be even more powerful than any of us ever thought.